Years ago, I got in contact with Jean-Paul Klose. Jean-Paul had a project underway. Compared to many other initiatives, there was a huge difference. Where others get stuck in a crippling bureaucracy and an overwhelming complexity, they had succeeded. What triggered my attention was that he had applied flatten the curve practices. This is something I had done as well. It was part of my job. Both of us have applied it years before COVID arrived. That's where it gets really interesting. With that, welcome. My name is Eugen Oetringer. And welcome to Jean-Paul Klose. Thank you for making your experiences available here. Could you tell us what made you start your initiative and what it is about?
Well, Eugen, very interesting that you asked this question, and also this reference to tipping points and flatten the curve. That at a time when I started with my ideas, I didn't know anything about flatten the curve yet. I was very much worried about my own condition as single father with 2 children, that the values that we were carrying as parents, that they were not adopted in the same way as society. And I started to look at society as a father with these same core values. And I thought we were going totally the wrong way. It was going to go into stress and crisis. So I wanted to do something about it. And I was recognizing already that we were going to go into great difficulties in all kind of areas, political areas, and all kind of areas like energy crisis or whatever type of crisis. I started even publishing articles about it, but that was focusing on the drama that we were facing as humankind. I didn't know yet how to deal with that. I had to find a way, and one way was trying to fight the system, and that was one of the things that I tried to do. Try to change the energy thing, try to change the care system, try to say, but I continuously got blocked away by the system itself, because the system was very much value driven. So I had to figure out to do it in a different way. And the only way I could do that was to step out of the system and then define my own values and start inviting people to those values. And then suddenly I found that I did manage to get attention in the system. I did manage to get people. And I was helped, of course, in 2009 by the credit crisis, the financial crisis. The trust in the banking system and the financial world was disappearing. So people started looking for alternatives. So when they looked at the alternatives, they started to listen to my sound. Suddenly they started to become interested in at least listening to me. And but that didn't mean yet that we were getting into joint ventures to do things in a different way. But it was a starting point. Starting point, therefore, was my awareness as a single father, understanding that we were running into difficulties as a society as a whole, because we were not conducting through core values, particular values that I had defined, but I did not know at that time yet how to deal with it. So in between fighting the system and doing something in a different way, that was the type of experimenting that I was doing.
Okay, thanks very much. Then I would say, let's have a closer look into Flatten the Curve. What we have done with the Law of Nature Manifesto is to identify another exponential growth than the one with Corona. And that curve, let's look a little bit different. Let's have a closer look into that. Over the past 2 decades, the exponential growth of complexity and bureaucracy has happened. It has happened to the maximum level affordable. And yeah, when we look from the flatten the curve perspective into it, then flatten the curve looks like this. Now, Jean-Paul, I wonder, when you started your initiative, where do you think the environment you had to get on board was on this curve? So if I start at the bottom and move up slowly, just let me know when you think this is a place where the environment was at the time.
Well, just about there where you are now.
Okay.
And then I have to insist that there are various aspects which you have to be taken into consideration, because on this line, on the top of the arrow, you say collapse. And you have to understand that when I managed to get attention in the system was when one of the collapses had occurred, which was the financial collapse, the banking crisis in 2008. And that is when I had been addressing the system before that. But they didn't want to listen because they were thinking that with economy of growth, it would be able to solve absolutely all the problems of the world. But then when the system collapsed, they opened up to looking at all kind of other type of issues that were at hand. So there was a combination of factors. It was not just one factor.
Okay. And then you started to apply Flatten the Curve. What practices, or what Flatten the Curve practices did you find or apply?
Well, it was thanks to you that I got introduced in the Flatten the Curve type of thinking. But at that time, I was not thinking of Flatten the Curve. I was thinking and trying to change society by addressing core values of people. And I was looking at the system according to the line, the vertical line that you see here, that was going, in my point of view, it was going to collapse in all kinds of systems, like food collapse, energy collapse, healthcare collapse, financial collapse, all the collapses that I could see. And I was surprised that I was apparently the only one who was seeing it, because everybody else in the system was just doing what the system was expecting from them what to do. So I was stepping out of the system. But my first concern was to see, what the hell can I do to get people's attention? Because if I address the issues like energy or care or whatever within the system, the people don't want to listen to me. But when I stepped out and I defined something else, like for instance, human health, then certainly people started to listen to me. So I had to find, and I called that, instead of Flatten the Curve, I called it myself the law of opposite. If if there is a point of singularity or a point of collapse going on through a system which is centralized care or centralized energy or something, you have to find something which is exactly opposite. So I didn't want to look at energy problems or look at the problems of healthcare. I started to look at the co-creating care for health, which is turning around the words. And then there was circumstances. I was not criticizing the old way of working, despite the fact that I knew that it was going to get to a collapse. What I was doing is trying to create something new that I can manage to grow, so that the other part was going to reduce its negative effects. So Flatten the Curve occurs when you accept doing things in a different way. And I think it was Einstein also who said, well, you can only solve the problems if you think in a different way than the way the problems were caused. And that was exactly what I did. I introduced something new for the people to join, people and institutions.
Yeah. So what was the new? What were the new things? Okay, there was creating something new, but there was more.
Well, creating something new, there were various aspects. The first thing is that I see society as a co-creation rather than a fragmented set of silos, like where we were coming from, because each of the silos has a tendency of growing out of their own proportions and then creating a collapse for the rest of the silos. So what I wanted to do is bring everybody together into a shared responsibility. And that was a first step. But then bring them together in something which already is being done in the silos, that didn't work. So I had to define something new. And the new thing was the core human values. And the core human values were defined as health, safety, awareness, co-creation, and the basic needs that we need every day, like air, the air that we breathe, the food that we eat, and those kind of things. So paying attention to those core values, there was a combination, which is health and air quality, that suddenly managed to get all those people around the table. So instrument of co-creation and or shared value, shared responsibility, and finding those elements outside the system that have an importance but have not been blocked by the system.
Yeah, what intrigued me about this is when looking from a dependency perspective into this dependency and timing perspective. So instead of working through the dependencies with different groups, addressing them one by one, when they have time, the huge difference that came over to me was that they were together in one room and that they worked together on some common matter, and that drastically reduced the obstacles as I experience it. Correct me if you see it differently, but that reduced the number of dependencies and obstacles drastically, and made a tipping point to get to a level where it becomes executable much lower.
I don't know. The main thing is that when you put people around the table which are not of the same silo, but are a cross-section of all the stakeholders of society, which is the citizens, business, government, science, education, and you put them all around the table, then everybody has a very significant contribution. They don't look at each other from distrust anymore. They look at each other from what can you bring to the table. And that is a very, very interesting, situation to deal with. To manage to get to such a table, you have to have something that is of the interest of everybody. And that
sounds to me like a very interesting flatten the curve practice I haven't even thought about.
Is that right?
Okay. Were there any other flatten the curve practices you found and applied?
Well, it's not only flatten the curve practices, it's the stages in flatten the curve. For the first stage you want to do is you want to get this curve going below the maximum affordable. But it's not really the maximum affordable because you know that you're going to get into crisis if you cross that line. But what you want to do is to get into a new balance, into a situation where you don't even have to worry about those maximum affordables because you're getting into a rhythm where you are really in the flatten the curve. The first step, therefore, is to get people to take their responsibility and to share that responsibility together. Then you get into the first part of the curve. But to get into the blue part of the curve, real measures have to be taken, real measures of change. And that requires the trust of all the people around the table to sit there, be together, and actually manage to do really confrontational changes into behavior or into policy making or those kind of things. And you can only do that when you can look at each other in the eyes, and you can do it all together, because you're really transforming the system, and the system, it requires everybody at the same time. So it's different stages to get to the flatten the curve, and then you can apply it to just about everything. You can apply it to the care system, you can apply it to the food system, you can do the agriculture, you can air quality, the mobility structure of the entire society. You can just apply it to absolutely everything, and then have wellness of the people still guaranteed. But while they are busy with the wellness, the way the wellness is being defined is going to be changing all over. We will use different type of heating systems. We will use different type of mobilities. We will be happy to do so, because we do it together. And then we see that everybody has a say in it, and we make it comfortable for everybody to do those changes. It's not because somebody imposes the law on us. It's because we commonly decide to do so because of a common practice and a shared responsibility.
Okay, and I understand you have not just proposed doing it in other areas, but you have already started projects in other areas, like food and so forth, haven't you?
Absolutely, yes. It's like when you get the umbrella right, then the umbrella will get into fragmented solutions just about everywhere else into the system. So when I started with air quality, it was clear that we were going to redefine the city from a health point of view. So you get involved in healthy city design. How do you find a city which has never been defined from a health perspective? How do you transform a city which is being constructed from a trade point of view or an industrial point of view, and then suddenly becomes a health-driven type of ideology defining the city? The whole architecture changes, the mobility changes, the infrastructure changes, the behavior of the people changes. Just about everything changes.
Okay.
And the beautiful thing is, it's fun that it changes. It's not suddenly the people see it as something that is not only needed, but it's also acceptable for themselves.
Okay. What would you say were the most important results achieved from your approach?
Well, it already in 2015, 2016, we received a few rewards and awards of people, and they recognized there were two things that we managed to do. And the very first thing is to define the core values that really got the people together. And the second one was to work together in a multidisciplinary context that get all the disciplines together, including the citizens, to work out these type of changes and things together. That was the major thing, because once you do that, every participant has to change. They don't look at each other from a competitive point of view, like, what do you do? And you do everything wrong, government does everything wrong, and the citizens do everything wrong. Now suddenly we start looking, what can we do together to do it right? Which is a totally different way of looking at reality and dealing with each other.
Okay, and what would you advise people who wanted to start initiatives today? What should they do?
Well, the very first thing is the way I started myself, to look at reality from a more holistic point of view, step out of reality and have a look at it and say, okay, where are my bottlenecks? Where are my tipping points, my potential tipping points going? And how can I step out of the system and bring in some new values to get enthusiasm going with everybody, so that those tipping points disappear and we get into flatten the curve. But the flatten the curve should be a natural process. It should not be a forced process. It should be a natural process that is a result of the commitment that we share together in doing things in a different way.
Okay. Anything else you want to share?
Well, we're not there yet. We managed to get all these people together. We managed to get people in, also the institutions, in true transformation of working together based on trust and on their own authenticity. But the real in-depth changes that have to be done, that are very, not just confrontational, they are challenging all our habits of the last few hundred years. All those habits, they need to change, and that is something very important. So I think we have put the basis, the foundation of doing these things together. But now the most important thing is that based on that solid foundation, we have to do the changes, and that is going to be, as far as I'm concerned, right now the most intense part that we're going to be dealing with. But I think it's also going to be the most rewarding, the most exciting part, and the biggest innovative part, because it's going to generate all kinds of new economies. It's going to be new impulses, new enterprises, absolutely a whole new system is going to arise. And once the people start trusting that, then they become enthusiastic about building this new environment. But it still needs to grow. It's all very much localized. It's here. We have to go international with it. There's so much to do still, because the world is not yet into a flatten the curve mode. We have managed to do it here in Eindhoven, where I live. And we are managing to do it in Brabant, the province, and maybe part of the Netherlands. But on a worldwide scale, we still have a lot. We can maybe share this as an experience and help other people to do it. But it will certainly be challenging to get this across the world, working across the world. It is indeed.
Okay, you run this approach also under a certain name, if you can share that for our visitors.
Well, this society model, the umbrella is called sustainocracy, sustainable human progress. And then underneath that umbrella, the all new economies started rising. And then it's the STIR Foundation, which is collecting all the expertise and everything. And then underneath it are very clusters which are defined around the priorities in the region. Here we have AiREAS. AiREAS is the cluster around air quality and human health. It's a healthy city development, healthy rural development and everything. And then we have the School of Talents, for instance, which is a new learning system based on these core values. We have FRESH, which is working on the food resilience and everything, making food something that also in the city environment is less vulnerable than what we are now. So that's, if we look at the world, we can define the priorities in all the world, but and we can apply this flatten the curve everywhere in the world where there are problems to be solved, but we have to look at those problems to be solved by doing the things in a different way than where the problems have been arisen.
Okay, Jean-Paul, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
And for those who want more information, we'll of course share the contact information in a moment. Thank you very much.
You too. Thank you.